I met Kristaps when he first came over this summer before his last year in Sevilla. And he shows up and they lost his bags. So
Wow.
we ended up kind of our first adventure together. I showed up and, we were running around trying to find a pair of 16s in Las Vegas. We actually never found a pair of shoes.
Get out
And
of here.
I ended up stealing a pair of Kyle O'Quinn's size 16s. I want to say they were Nike Zoom BBs. I
Yeah.
had an opportunity to work with him after that, but I did steal his sneakers before we knew each other.
Dope is what flows in his fam's DNA. Dope is what flows in his fam's DNA.
What's good, everybody, and welcome to Dope Interviews, brought to you by the mighty 19 Media Group. I'm your host, Warren Shaw, and in the virtual villain today, I have one of the more influential people in the NBA. That's how I met him, but he's doing stuff all over sports and in movies and in entertainment. He's worked with some of the best in the business, guys and names you will know that we'll obviously get into through the course of this interview. He is the founder of Rhome Sports and Entertainment, my guy, and I can legitimately say this, my guy, Dan Rohme. Dan, what's good, man? Welcome to Dope Interviews, brother.
Thank you, sir. Warren, we go way back. I'm super excited to do this and just absolutely blessed to have you as a colleague and as a friend.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we haven't had the opportunity to connect in a while, and I'm glad that the podcast can allow us to do that. Just kind of chop it up as colleagues and friends. And you've done a lot, man. And for our listeners, shout out to our guy Jared Zwirling as well, to kind of brought us together so many years ago. I was working at Dime Magazine. You were working with a sports agency, in the event and marketing space. And I got to say, because of you, I got to do one of Kristaps Porziņģis' first interviews in the U.S. I think I might have been number 2, but either way, I was one of the first people that Porziņģis spoke to as he was getting drafted that year by the New York Knicks. So I'm always appreciative of you for that, man. I wanted to give you your flowers one more time on that, brother.
Absolutely. It was fantastic. I think, working with Kristaps, I met Kristaps when he first came over this summer before his last year in Sevilla. And it's actually a pretty funny story. He showed up to our training facility, Impact, with Joe Bunasar out in Las Vegas. Fine, one of the best places anybody can train. And he shows up, and they lost his bags. So we ended up kind of our first adventure together. I showed up, and we were running around trying to find a pair of 16s in Las Vegas, which was quite difficult. We hit the Nike store, we hit Foot Locker. I mean, we were bouncing around all over the place. At what point, Kristaps was this kind of mild-mannered young man who had never been to America before. And I looked, I was, are you hungry? You hungry? He's like, listen, he's like, I want to try this thing called filet mignon. My American teammates told me all about it, but we don't have it in Europe. I said, listen, let's go. We went to the Palms in the mall over at Caesars.
The Palms was hitting back then, bro.
Yeah, it was. And we sat down. We had this great lunch. And at one point, he turned to his brother and he said, why does this guy curse so much? Is he mad? And it was his brother was like, no, he's just from New York City. I think that kind of comes with the territory. So we actually never found a pair of shoes. And I ended up stealing a pair of Kyle O'Quinn's size 16s. I want to say they were Nike Zoom BBs. And he actually became a client after that. He was a Holy Cross guy.
Wow.
And, it was over a weekend. So Kyle didn't need him. Kyle actually retired from basketball yesterday, taking a big job with the Spartans at Norfolk State. So I'm really excited for that. He's one of a dear friend. And I had an opportunity to work with him after that. But I did steal his sneakers before we knew each other.
Shout out to Kyle O'Quinn. The bearded one, man. That's crazy. Well, we're off to an amazing start here, I think, with the storytelling. And I think for somebody like you who just has like this breadth of experience, like your ability to endear yourself and to be able to get people to trust you, to be able to build the relationships that ultimately lead to great partnerships and money, but opportunities and exposure for them that is positive. So I want to get into all of that, but Dope Interviews, we got to kind of start in the beginning. And so for our fans and listeners, I think it's kind of a 2-part question, right? And we can fast forward a little bit, but what got you into sports in general? Did you play? Did you have the aspirations like many of us did to be an athlete and be in whatever league at some point? And then how did you get into the business side of kind of like what you're doing here now?
Absolutely. So, it's funny. I say everything I needed to learn in this business, I learned on the corner of 205th Street and 42nd Avenue. I
Oh,
had the absolute immense pleasure of growing up in Queens, New York in the 90s. It's funny, you see these brands like Kith and Emilior, like those guys all grew up in my neighborhood, and they're actually selling a clothing brand that just represents the culture that we had growing up. I mean, we were the cool kids, right? We listened to the best music. Everybody had the flyest shoes. We were just out there. We were in the streets. We were kids in New York City, running around on the subway, moving around, and it was incredible. From there, I actually started working. Got my first job when I was 13, cleaning pots and pans. At a pool club, and so I was working at the snack bar. I was out, it was the hardest job I've ever had. I made $4 an hour. It was completely illegal. I was only 13. I didn't have my working papers yet. It was off the books. I had this hot kitchen. One day I almost passed out. They sent me home. I ended up having a tough day. But, from there, I met a gentleman named Mike Chapman. Mike was a graphic designer for the NBA. When I first got out of college, he was working there. He was creating jerseys. He was a huge basketball guy and just a really great creative. And he would freehand a lot of jerseys. In fact, one of the that I remember most was he did that Golden State with the trolley on it. From back in like the Antoine Jameson days. And he was super talented, and he kind of always suggested that I come work at the NBA. When I first got out of college, it was, the job really required nights and weekends. So, at the time I was a young man and I was a little bit concerned with, spending my weekends and my nights, behind a computer
That's
screen.
that's uh,
So,
that's putting it mildly. Yeah, young man,
yeah.
you were concerned. Yeah, he was out in these streets. He was out in these streets,
So,
Dan.
100%. So I took a job with the TV show Inside Edition. So I was working at Inside Edition, and it was a great experience. It was TV. It was fast paced. But I just really didn't enjoy the content, and the stuff was just kind of, it was a lot of celebrity based stuff, and it was just, it wasn't super interesting to me. And actually, the brawl at the Palace happened, and I was the only person that knew anything about basketball. So I was working as a video logger. So they brought in all these feeds of the actual brawl, and from there, I was watching all this basketball. I was naming the players and describing all these different things, and I was like, wow, I love this. Like, this is watching basketball. I'm getting paid. This is fantastic. After that, I decided, well, basketball season, when it comes back around, I need to go do this NBA thing. So ended up starting out at the league office as a video logger. I was basically as low on the totem pole as you could be without cleaning a toilet bowl. So from there, I was working nights. I go in at 7 p.m. and work till 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's funny, I kind of got in there and I didn't have much training because I had done it before. And my first game was a Phoenix Suns, and I forget who they were playing, but they were running that 9 seconds or less offense. And it wound up going to triple overtime. And the computer system that we used just couldn't handle the amount of possessions, and it just
Oh my
crashed.
God.
And so it's my first day alone. Everyone left. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting there trying to do this thing by hand without a computer system. And I mean, they just kept on scoring. The game kept on going on. It was just an absolute brutal mess. About 9 o'clock in the morning, my boss comes in. Oh, hey Dan, how you doing? Goes into his office, comes out a couple minutes later. He's like, Dan, you're supposed to be working nights. I'm like, yeah, no, I haven't left yet. And he's like, what happened? And I explained what happened, and I ended up driving, home, and I called my dad, and I was like, this was a terrible mistake. What did I do? And I'm literally, living in Queens, working in Secaucus. I'm going over the George Washington
Ooh,
Bridge, which is
G-Dub.
just brutal traffic at
Yeah.
9 a.m. in the morning with all these people commuting to work. I haven't gone to sleep yet. So it was a rough day. It was one of my worst days in the business, but it was all downhill from there. So after that, I met a gentleman named Jared Franzreb. Jared kind of took me under his wing. He was a senior vice president, kind of introduced me to a lot of different things. Had a great experience working for him. Learned so much. Probably this, just have this crazy attention to detail now. And that's one of those things that kind of transfers into kind of everything you do. And before him, I wouldn't notice a hand grenade go off in a room, but because of him, he saw every little detail, and that's something that I kind of pride myself in now. And from there, actually, Andy Miller knew Jared was looking for somebody to kind of come in and help him rebrand Kyle Lowry. So from there, I thought it was a really interesting opportunity. Obviously, I never thought I'd work on the agency side.
Wait,
But the
what
more
was your degree in?
I had a journalism degree, actually,
Okay.
communications. So it was at where I went to school. You could either be a comms guy, or a PR guy, or journalism guy. And I kind of always, I like to write, and I was a little bit more on the creative side. So I went journalism degree, and I feel like if you can write, you can do anything, right? You can communicate,
Yep.
you can do anything. So now I'm a professional handshaker, so it worked out. So left, went into ASM. My first kind of welcome to the agency business, well, welcome to Andy Miller's business, was he wanted me to have an event around their draft class. It was like Peyton Siva and Eric Murphy and a
Yeah.
bunch of kind of second round guys. And he wanted to do kind of, I talked, we said, well, we could do a charity event, where we had all these GMs coming in for the pro day. We had to feed them, make sure everybody had water. We were bringing our European players to kind of have a little combine for them. And we had kind of had a laundry list of things to do, and I was very excited about it. And I asked Andy what my budget was, and Andy told me zero. And I was just like, okay, well, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. This isn't the NBA where I'm going to have X amount of dollars and resources. So we figured it out. We got it done. It was a great event. Actually, had the Boys and Girls Club come out, and we did a little clinic for them. And then the next day we had everybody from like you name the teams. We had them all there. We hosted them. We fed them. Everybody had a great day, and the guys showed out, and it was a fantastic start. So after that, it took me about a year to get my kind of my footing, and really start figuring the business out. But the thing I really learned was PR. PR was just overlooked in the agency world, and everybody's marketing dollars. Where are the dollars? Is this we're gonna make money? And the thing I think they didn't see is that the PR side of thing is really the foundation of a brand. If you're building a house, you have to have a strong foundation, and the PR gives you that, right? The PR gives you an opportunity to tell your story. The PR gives you an opportunity to gain more fans, and the PR gives you an opportunity to control the narrative around your players. And I think that was kind of lost. So when I came in, I started kind of establishing that, and really kind of pushing the narrative around our players. At the time, we had about 40 guys in the NBA. So Chauncey Billups, Kevin Garnett, Isaiah Thomas, Jamal Crawford, guys, that we ended up kind of bringing, Timo Mozgov. We did some fun stuff with Timo, Sergei Karasev, and then we brought in Myles Turner, Kristaps, Nerlens Noel. So we really, we were doing some great business, and everything went really well. From there, about 2019, I left and went out on my own. It was kind of time for me to spread my wings, and I kind of was traveling and really kind of really overseeing 40 different people, right? Like, and that was tough because agents have their specific guys. Maybe they got 6 clients, maybe they got 10 guys, and they don't kind of venture into the other agents' clients, where because of what I was doing, and because it wasn't just marketing deals, where if a guy isn't the best player, he's not necessarily having a ton of marketing deals. These were PR opportunities I could get kind of for everybody, right? So it was an opportunity for us to kind of build relationships and be out there and doing stuff. So
Okay.
it was a tremendous amount of travel. It was a lot. It was a lot going on. So at the time, it was good for me to get out there and kind of start my own business. And now I have a better quality of life, but it's a little bit more stressful. But other than that, it's been great. I mean, I wouldn't recommend starting a business right before a global pandemic, but outside of that, I haven't failed yet. It's been 6 years. So it's been, I mean, you blink your eye because you're so busy and you're moving around, and it's been tremendous. I've had guys like, Kyle Lowry and Miles and Kristaps and Serge Ibaka, and that have really kind of helped me, and given me the opportunity to help them, and bring things through the door. And I've had some great partners, like a production company called Framework, where we do some really great commercials, and really just, had an opportunity to work with Tobias Harris, Kelly Oubre, through Terrell Harris. That was great. There's just, kind of, it's fun being out on your own. It's stressful, obviously, but having the opportunity to really kind of get out there and meet all these kind of smaller agents, and that have, just kind of, not these huge businesses that maybe need my services. And, there's just some wonderful people out in this business with so many different stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're chatting with Dan Rome here, founder of Rhome Sports and Entertainment here on Dope Interviews. This is my guy, dropping some bars, some great knowledge, and his kind of come up into the sports space. Let's take a quick break here on Dope Interviews, y'all, and we'll be right back. Basketball season is heating up, and Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed when you use the promo code CLNS. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts and is available in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and my home state of Florida. Due to the enormous selection of players and stat types available, you can mix and match your playing strategies based on your personal preferences. I'm a Celtics guy, so I might take Tatum for more than 27 points, and maybe I'll rock with Porziņģis for more than 2 blocks. And for those who love a quick win, PrizePicks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, with PrizePicks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. Again, that's promo code CLNS to get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And we're back here in Dope Interviews with my guy, Dan Rohme. Make sure you follow him at DRome on IG. Dan, so as you were talking about the matriculation, basically from college to the NBA, to Inside Edition, to working with Andy Miller, now to eventually be in your own space as a entrepreneur, truly, with the Rohme Sports and Entertainment. There's a lot of stories that I would love to kind of get into, but as we're going through Dope Interviews, like, I just feel like when I have somebody like you on here, it's important to understand some of the struggles, and some of the lessons that can be taught from this as well too. So while the stories are amazing and people are going to click because of some of those things, I want to kind of even understand your story and kind of like your perspective on the business even a little bit further. And we were kind of talking off air, and I've been, sports adjacent obviously for a little while too. And it's just, it's always not as glamorous as I think some people think it is, especially when you're starting off, right? And there's sometimes you got to do some, for lack of a better phrase, some like lower level stuff. You know what I mean? And people are like, oh, I can't believe this is happening in this space. And I won't necessarily call any things out, but I always remember like working with the Super Bowl committee one year, and I was like, oh, these are just like some cubicles. You know what I mean? It wasn't any like overly glamorous. Can you tell us and tell our listeners kind of like, what is probably the most unexpected thing people realize about working in sports, as you've talked to different people in the various walks of sports that you've worked with them within?
Number one, it's a grind, right? I mean, you think, oh, you go to basketball games, but it's like, yeah, no, I go to a basketball game, and, if it's in another city, I'm on a 6 a.m. flight out the next morning after getting back to my hotel room at midnight. I think it's even if you're at the Knicks game, you get out at 10 o'clock, you get home at 11, you're amped up, you're asleep by 12:31. People are looking for me at 8 a.m., maybe even earlier. So, that part of it's a grind. And then, there's especially on the management side, there's just always something going on. There's something to do. Obviously, if you're in a big company, you kind of have these little minions that can kind of run around and take care of things. But, for me, as my own business, like, I do some very unglamorous things, there's been times when I worked for the agency, I had a guy, I'm not going to tell you who it was, but we had done a deal to get soccer jerseys for his basically just his mother had a friend who had a soccer team. They had no money. They were very, they had no funding, and he wanted to get soccer jerseys for them. I had this small boutique, one little mom and pop shop, was super excited, and they said the only thing they wanted was a photo, and a video from this player saying, "Oh, I got my jerseys here. Thank you so much." I mean, really just nice, salt of the earth people, were so kind, so excited. And I brought the jerseys and I told the player, "Hey, I'm going to be here. Got to get that, got to get that what we agreed upon." And he's like, "Oh, just leave the jerseys. I'll send it to you." I was like, "No." And this guy was very flaky. And,
Mm.
at the time I said, "No, I got to get this done. I can't leave here with the jerseys." And I had driven, I'm not going to tell you the town, but I had driven about, 3 hours to get there with the jerseys, and, picked the jerseys up, brought them over because they were local. And I sat there and waited, and I waited and I waited, and we were playing hide and go seek, and
Wow.
I think he was in the house. He just didn't want to shoot this video. And I said, "Listen, we got to get this done. You have to do this, or we're going to end up, having to pay for these, because I'm not going to do this to these people. These people are kind people.
Yeah.
They don't make a lot of money. This is something that they were very excited about. I'm not going to disappoint them." So I got there about 10 a.m., and finally at 10 p.m.,
Wow.
I decided that, I talked to the agency, and we decided that we would just pay for them, because it wasn't a big deal, but it wasn't a ton of money. But it just was one of those things where I was steadfast, like, "No, we're
Principle.
not going to screw these people over."
Yeah.
So, I spent about 12 hours of my day that I'll never get back. And then some of the other stuff that is terrible is air travel. We're
Yeah.
not flying private, that's for sure. But I got stuck in O'Hare Airport 3 weeks ago for 9 hours. It's definitely a glorified bus terminal, but it was tough. And it's definitely a grind.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thank you for sharing. And, I've told this story on our show, a couple times, when I interned, and this is not disparaging in any way, because I was treated extremely well. Um, but I think just kind of understanding, like I worked for the Knicks as an intern some time ago, so the organization was fine, but sometimes the players are like what is going on here, bro? Like, just do the thing. And we did a lot of stuff with the community, and we go out to boys and girls clubs, and we have to go up, up into Manhattan College and a couple of different places or whatever. And I was just like, players don't show up, and and there's kids or there's people like really, really depending on them. And again, I'm not even doing what you were doing or whatever, but at the same time, like, it sometimes that is a highlight of people's day. You know what I mean? Like, hey, so I can imagine this mom and pop shop said, "Hey, I'm gonna do, these jerseys for X player or X person. Hey, I just want a photo." Like, you know, for them, that was worth more than the money that they would get for the jerseys. Like, they
Yeah.
realized what it was. So
And they knew they were doing the right thing. They knew
yeah,
they're helping people that were in need, and they were excited about that, and they were good people, and they weren't asking a big favor.
yeah,
And back to your point, I think, listen, like, these guys are, listen, I'm not going to tell you to cry for an NBA player, because
right, right,
obviously anybody would kill for the job, but it is, again, they fit. A lot of people don't know, like, they finished playing and they're playing in Memphis. They're going and getting on a flight after and they're flying in, and they're getting to their hotel room, and they're getting up, and they're doing things, and it's a grind.
yeah,
I do think there's an art to helping these guys understand and get into the mood of doing these things, right? I think it's kind of explaining to them how impactful it is. It's kind of getting them loose, getting them, telling them some jokes, and kind of just getting them into that kind of, loose and relaxed kind of, way, and then getting them in, and then getting them out, right? And I would rather have 20 minutes of a guy being magnetic and engaged, and just really just really just kind of pouring it on, than have a guy there for an hour and he doesn't want to be there, and his body language sucks, and everything else. And I think at the end of the day, it's us as reps, it's people as team people. I think it's best that they really kind of, get out there and just kind of, it's an art. Everybody thinks they can do what I do. Everybody thinks it's so easy, but it's not, and you really have to be a people person. You really have to kind of understand how to motivate people. You have to have a personality. I mean, personality is huge.
Yeah.
You got to be able to make people laugh. You got to be able to kind of joke around with them, and it's important. Like you get them kind of, ready, and they walk in there, and then they kill it, and then they walk out, and you know what? They feel good, and then you sit there, and then you reinforce that good feeling. You see, oh my, did you see that little girl? She was so
Yeah.
excited for you. That was such a beautiful moment, and you reinforce and you reinforce so that they really understand how impactful it was, right? Because now that event's over, but the next event, they're going to remember that, oh, that little girl was so great. And listen,
Right.
some guys are great at it, some guys aren't good at it. And, it's just one of those things. Some people, and, it comes down like some people just have anxiety. Like they get over, it's so much
Stimulated. Yeah.
happening, and, and,
Yeah.
and they get overstimulated, and they've never taken it. They're basketball players. What are they've never taken the time to understand that part of their psychological profile, because what are they, it doesn't matter. They just think, oh, I don't like this, right? But it's like understanding, well, this guy's good with this good. I had a client that loved activating the community. I took him to one hospital that had kids in it, and I mean, he played bad for like maybe 3 games after that, because he
Mm.
was so upset, And
Wow.
it's like, he was so, had so much empathy for these children, and seeing them so sick that it messed them up, and that's a beautiful thing, But then
The
it's
human
my
side.
job as a rep to see that, to understand that, to diagnose it. I kind of had to help him through it, and then from there on, when we're activating the community, we have to kind of, kind of stay away from those things, just because it impacted him so bad, as tough as that was. And I
Wow.
think that all comes down to being a good rep.
No, it absolutely does. And I've always said, being in this business, you are even not what your title says it is. You're a friend, you're a psychologist, you're a business representative. You know what I mean? Like you're slash slash
100%.
slash 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 100%, right? So, um, but one of the things too, is even I call back on my time, being more involved in it more poignantly, especially for the emergence of podcasts and like how we're on here now, was it was a grind on just me as an individual, and I haven't even aspired and been at the levels that you were at. So there's a real penalty that you have to pay, I think, with some of your own personal relationships, family, and stuff like that. So how have you navigated that situation? I mean, the athletes, I guess it kind of comes into air quote territory, like, their wives or husbands or whatever, significant others, even kids to a less degree, understand daddy, mommy, whatever is going to be on the road X amount of time because they're making millions of dollars playing this thing. But from the representative side, it's often missed that, hey, like you just said earlier, like you're traveling, you're on the road like all the time, and your family pays a toll as a result of that.
No, 100%, and just as a father, it's to be present when you are here.
Mm.
But it's tough. I definitely, I tried not to miss the big things. And there were days that, I'd walk into a school dance, for one of my daughters, and I'd be in a full suit with a Nick credential around my neck. You know what I mean? And like, oh man, let me take this off. And it's just one of those things. It's like, I listen, my social life took a hit, getting, when I was working for the agency, working out and staying fit, definitely took a hit. I don't really have any hobbies outside of lifting weights, and spending time with my kids. But my job is my hobby, right? Like
Yeah.
so, it fulfills me. It definitely gives me a lot of joy. And it's not an easy bit. Like there's I haven't had a day off since I started this job, right? Like I may go on vacation, but I'm still probably working. I'm still kind of answering emails. I'm still making phone calls. Not as bad, obviously as a regular, normal day, but the phone doesn't stop ringing. It's 24/7. And that's a service that I provide for my clients. I will never tell, oh, hey, I don't know how to set up an out of office reply where it says like, oh, sorry, I'm on vacation with
Yeah.
limited availability, please reach out to so and so. I don't even know how you set that up. You know what I mean? So
We'll
it's
talk
like,
offline, Dan. We'll talk offline.
yeah,
We gotta get
I
you in
don't
the
need it.
mental
I'm
space.
going to be forwarding emails to you, and then what are we going to do?
Well, we can definitely work together, on that as well too. And we've had some conversations over the years, brother. And I think this is
Definitely.
definitely a good one here. We're chatting with my guy Dan Rohme here, a founder of Rhome Sports and Entertainment. Let's take another quick break here on Dope Interviews, man. We'll be right back again. And we're back here, Dan Rome, continuing to bring all the insights and just the greatness of his work within the sports space. There's many years of experience, working with so many different clients out there. So I want this to be a little bit of story time, Dan. So you've given us more than a handful of nuggets throughout the course of this interview thus far, but your favorite deal or activation that you were kind of involved in at the highest level. If you can recall, and if you can name names, awesome. If not, I respect that as well too. But your favorite deal or activation that you were a part of, you're like, man, this is so amazing that we got to put this together.
I think there's a couple. One of my kind of favorite ones, just because of the way it came about, was I was visiting my mom in Fort Myers, Florida, with my daughters and my ex-wife, and we got delayed, and that we were super crowded, and so I got the three of them in some seats, and then there was kind of one seat across from them, and I sat down, and they're on their devices and doing kind of whatever, and I turned and I looked at this gentleman, and I was like, you travel a lot? And he's like, oh yeah, I do this and that, and kind of starts going into his spiel. He's like, well, I have this mattress company in New Jersey, and we make these handmade mattresses, and we can make custom sizes. We do really kind of all these different ways to do any kind of length. We can do this, we can do that. And I looked at
See where
him,
this is going.
I was like, wow. I was like, what? I got some customers for you. He was like, what do you do? I was like, I'm an MBA agent. And in fact, I had this 7'2" kid from Lafayette, and his legs are hanging off the bed like you wouldn't believe. And so I'm like, I'd love to come by the showroom and check this out. Shout out to Bill Hammer from Shiftman Mattress.
Go,
They
Bill.
had me come down to their factory in Newark, New Jersey, where they're still making things with these like crazy like 1920 machines that are bringing in all this. It's just, I mean, it's insane. The stuff that they're using is so old school and traditional. And then you lay down in these beds, and they're absolutely incredible, like nothing you've ever laid in. So we ended up doing a deal with KP. I think Billy Hernan Gomez got in on it. Myles Turner, and they ended up being just these fantastic mattresses. And I sleep on one today, and they're
There
they're
you
they're
go.
just great. So that was definitely a fun one. I think
You didn't again. You just did that by being friendly and talking to somebody in the airport.
yeah,
Like that's
just hey, what do
yeah.
you do? So that was definitely interesting. I think something recently. I've started a talent business and kind of book guys in for promos. So I work with a great production company called Framework. They're just kind of first, they're just best at what they do, and I've built up this wonderful relationship with them. And we actually we're working with Universal, and they came to us with an idea for a promo for Despicable Me 4 with Nikola Jokić. And up until that point, he had only been in that Hotels.com commercial.
Yep.
So we ended up getting that done. And we had his stylist and I, Adri, who is one of the greatest stylists in the sports world, really, and a dear friend. We kind of had this before we knew the script. We had kind of made him a Gru outfit. And it was fantastic, and she had it customized, and they ended up kind of going more with a suit look, and you'll see it in the commercial. And so we had this great outfit, and Adrian and I were sitting there talking about it. I was like, we can't believe this is going to go to waste. I was like, why doesn't he wear it to game one of the
Oh
playoffs?
wow.
And she was like, that's a great idea. And I was like, you think you really do it? She's like, I think it would be amazing. And it's funny, at the time, people were choosing the Lakers to win that series. Everybody's, oh, Denver doesn't have it. LeBron's gonna come. They're gonna come out. They're gonna beat them. And that was the talk. All the talking heads online, everybody was saying, "Oh, Lakers are gonna win. Lakers are gonna win. Lakers are gonna win. ESPN. Lakers are gonna win." And then all of a sudden, Nikola Jokić shows up to game one looking like Gru. And it
Yeah.
just sent this message, that was like, we're ready. And I'm dressed like a cartoon villain. And they went out and they dominated. And to me, it's those psychological games when you get into the playoffs that really kind of set things apart. The other side of it, it was this branding moment that
Mm.
for the film, it went completely viral. Everybody was talking about it. It was literally on every show, and it was just kind of started with this little conversation with me and my dear friend Adri. Um, and it just caught fire, and it was one of those things where it was just in marketing you try and create these brand defining moments, and it was just kind of one of them, and it was it was fantastic, and it was a lot of fun.
Congratulations, like really and truly. And I think it is more meaningful even because, Joker doesn't really do a lot of stuff, as you alluded to,
Exactly.
like commercials, even interviews. Like it's just not really his bag. But I think you can find something that aligns with personality and fit. And that's really what this business is really all about. And
100%.
then yeah, because you
And I
don't
think
put
that
him in a
showed.
position where he's going to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And I think that showed his personality, right? He's got a
Yeah,
great, after being on set with him and seeing him joking around with everybody and making jokes, and he's got a phenomenal personality, and he's just a guy that, he's not super talkative, very serious, kind of gets to the point. In my personal opinion, best player in the NBA right
for
now.
sure.
And, he's transcendent. I mean, what he's able to do is, he's just phenomenal. I think I'd love to see co MVPs with him and Shea just because of, how great that young man is playing. But just unreal, and it was a really great experience for us.
Yeah, I do want to talk some basketball with you, but one, we hear about the good. We got to kind of get into, the negative. And I know with this, again, we're not in the space to be able to name names, but negotiations can be a very, very tense situation. You gave one story, with the soccer jerseys, but what else have you kind of had to bounce back from where you're like, oh man, this whole deal just went to crap, or this whole commercial, this like it just went to crap. Like, can you share any of those examples? And then, even if you're able to fix it in the moment, or did you just kind of have to call some of those things a wash?
It's tough, right? Like, because in my business, especially on the marketing side, we could work really hard to get a guy a deal, right? And you think it's the perfect deal. You get it in there, you start negotiating it, and it's just you get to this number, and you're just, oh, this is a slam dunk. He's gonna love it, and then you bring it to him, and they're just like, yeah, no, I don't want to do it. And you're like, no, but this is exactly what you've been telling me you want. Yeah, no, but I don't want to do it. And then it's like, oh man, or there's some deliverable that just doesn't get done, and then you're chasing them around, you're trying to get everything accomplished, and because it's my job. Everybody thinks like, you do the deal, they sign the deal, they shoot the commercial, whatever it is, oh, it's over. No, it's not over, right?
Mhm.
There's social posts, there's appearances, there's autographs, there's all kinds of different things. And then the other side is like, for me, I've been doing this so long, and I'm so, kind of, well versed and with a lot of experience and a lot of connections. I was working with a smaller agent, not in stature but in client roster. And he actually he had a client. He was seeking a very high number. There was a team that was offering him a mid-level number for this guy, and I told him, I said, listen, I've talked to everybody you have interest in him signing with. This is the best deal. Like, you need to take this deal. The market was perfect for the guy. He's going to be able to make money off the court. It was a big market, and I said, listen, this is it. That you
Yeah.
have to take this. You know what I mean? Like, but don't, like, do not. If this is, it's going to go away because it's what people don't understand is like free agency is musical chairs, right? So if you don't get you can be left without a chair, and we've seen that, with a lot of guys where they had an offer, they had a chair, and they said, I don't want this, I'm going to get something better, and then it disappears. Like these things are finite, right? The money is the money. And the new money, unless you're getting a sign and trade done, new money is not showing up places. And if those things don't present yourself, it's a game. It's having a feel for it. It's understanding that. So I communicated this to this guy, and really I got on a soapbox because I was worried about him and I was worried about the client, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, I'm in this to help people and to give them the best experience possible and the best career possible. And I take that very seriously. So I'm on a soapbox. You got to do this, you got to do this. He kind of brushes me off and is, oh, you're the marketing guy. You do what you do. I do what I do. And musical chairs ended, and he took a hit. He took a very large hit, on years, on guaranteed, on money. And maybe he was making about 40% of what that initial deal that I told him to take was, and the years, instead of four, he had two. So it was a terrible deal. It was the agent totally dropped the ball, and so the agent got the deal done, and he fired me because he
Right.
didn't. He wanted to control the narrative, right? He wanted to be the only voice in the room, and he didn't want the guy that pointed out what he should do and he didn't do to be in the mix. And that was a tough one. I'm just, I kind of kept it moving, and what else, what else am I going to do? But it's tough. It's tough when you were right, and then you lose an opportunity, you lose a retainer out of it. But at the end of the day, I can't do business, with people I don't respect, and that kind of, not to get off on a tangent. I've warned
No.
you about my tangents, but to me, the most empowering thing about having your own business is saying no to business, right?
Mm.
Because you think, you got to just do everything, got to take every opportunity. I got to make money. I got to make money. I'm gonna fail. I'm gonna fail. And when the situation isn't right, in the beginning, I took everything. And when I would take some of these things, I would burn relationships. I would not get paid. I'd have all these different issues. And I realized, like, if it doesn't feel right, you don't have to do it.
Mm. Love that.
And
Yeah.
it's just empowering being able to say, what, this isn't the right fit. I think you should look, elsewhere, and just letting it go, and being content with that. And I think that's something it took me a little while to learn, but I'm really happy I did learn that.
You're in the space you need to be in. I think, I don't know if you're spiritual or not, but what's for you will be for you. And I think you've I know you've made the right decisions, and to put your space to be Rhome Sports and Entertainment, the founder of that, of your own thing, and to be able to make the decisions that you want to make and work with the people you want to work with. That is an amazing, amazing, amazing situation, and I hope people here are chiming in and listening to that. Let's talk a little hoop stand before we conclude the overall conversation. And, one of the things that you've mentioned about, like I said, you are representing these folks, in the brand space. And part of, like, I've been having this conversation a lot. We just interviewed Kendra Andrews on the baseline, and we were talking about the WNBA, and like, all right, who's going to be the next face of the WNBA? Is that such a situation? And she was saying that basically a rising tide lifts all shifts. Like, it's not going to be on the one shoulder of anybody. It will be the collective, because the women's space is growing at such a rapid rate that everybody needs to be able to do their part. The NBA is a little different in that, because they are more well established, and we're seeing guys, especially at this past All-Star. I think Anthony Edwards made a lot of waves. Like, nah, it ain't gonna be me. We got Wemby for that. You've talked about, you work with Nikola Jokić or whatever the case may be. He's not really interested in face of the league situation. He's interested in getting the job, winning chips, and then going back home, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, that's his personality. So, but face of the league is more about what you do on the court. Is not just about what you do on the court, but it's also, again, how are you marketable? So give me your thoughts on that conversation, that very, very broad narrative of face of the league, and, who and how can some of the players in today's game potentially capture that mantle?
Absolutely. So, to me, when we start talking about the face of the league, I mean, obviously, no disrespect to Steph Curry, he's phenomenal, and I mean, just an unbelievable player, and top 10 of all time. but in my opinion, the face of the league has been LeBron for as long as I can remember. At this point,
Sure.
after kind of Kobe, it was definitely him. And the thing I remember is when LeBron was coming in, is he had this. He would talk about this goal of being a billionaire, right? And which he accomplished, which I think is just astounding, right? Because I remember hearing that and be like, a billionaire. Michael Jordan's not even a billionaire. Obviously, the money's gotten different and endorsement deals have gotten different. But, I remember being at the table like this kid is talking about being a billionaire. But what this man did was manifest it, right? Not only did he become the greatest player, of his generation, but what he also did was he worked his butt off the court, and he's still grinding off the court. And they make some great decisions, but he really puts the work in, right? Like he's out there grinding, he's on these commercial shoots, he's doing the stories, he's kind of making sure that his name is kind of top of mind. Because at the end of the day, the mistake I see a lot of people making, is that they decide and they some people have expressed this to me. Not talking about anybody in particular, but they've said that he wants to be the Birkin bag of marketing, right? He wants to just do these, be very exclusive, and that's fine, right? But
Sure.
at the end of the day, I'd say 70% of the country doesn't know what a Birkin bag is. You know what I mean? And certainly couldn't pick one out if you showed them 10 different pocketbooks. So at the end of the day, you're limiting yourself, right? So I think there's guys like Jason Tatum, SGA, and obviously said he doesn't want to do it. But, I think it's going to have to be one of those guys, because I think the Europeans are just built differently.
Oh, okay. Good point.
They come up, in European basketball system. They're not, at these big major programs where they have microphones and cameras in their face and they have people following them, and they have all these interests. They practice a couple times a day. They maybe talk to media once a week. It's not like America, right? Like you don't have a ton of marketing, you don't have a ton of brands. They're not having to kind of do the dog and pony show for the brands. They're really not out in the community doing anything. So for them, it's just hoops. It's hoops and time with family. And then, the other side of it is, right, like you have to think these Europeans are away from home, right? So it's like every player, obviously, very few are really home, in the place that they grew up in, or whatever it is. Maybe they make their playing city their home city, but these guys are really not home, right? So it's like, how would you feel? Warren Shaw had to go post up in Serbia for a month and a half. After a couple weeks, you would, just kind of want to be home and, around your family, and, you wouldn't really want to be into like, it's just kind of the thing. I mean, to them, Serbia is the spot. Serbia is a place they feel comfortable. Serbia, wherever, whatever country it is. And so I think it's just it becomes, one of those things. So it's gonna have to be an SGA who's, obviously a Canadian guy, but I think a little bit more fashionable, and does a great job on the brand. I think he's got a great manager, Agent Simon, right now, that is kind of very open-minded, and just doing some great stuff out there with him. Um, and I think a guy like Jason Tatum, who's in a major market. And I mean, you look at the body of work for Jason Tatum, and everything he's been able to accomplish. I mean, he's up there with the all-time greats, right? He's got the championship, he's got the all NBAs, he's got the all-star nods, and he was doing it at a young age. And I mean, listen, working with KP, I watch a ton of Celtics games, and having an opportunity to really see the way he works, and the way he rebounds and the way he passes, it's super impressive. He's a good looking guy. He has his, he's great. He's a good talker. He's got a great presence. And he's got a great little brand going. But I think, even him, I think he would have to really kind of sit down and really dedicate,
And open up
some
a little
off
bit.
season time,
Yeah.
some in season time to getting out there and really laying the foundation on the brand side, because you have to want it. It's as much work off the court as it is on. And it really, somebody has to want that, right? They have to want that attention. They have to want to be that person. And at the end of the day, if you don't want it, then it's not going to be genuine. It's not going to show up.
Yeah, Dan, I mean, bars there for sure. And as a Celtics guy. Tatum does get a lot of what I perceive to be disrespect in terms of his game. But I think, again, when you stack his records and his accomplishments up, it really is like he's Hall of Fame level, already. So like
Absolutely.
it's crazy that, but you're right to the overall point, whereas that, yes, these players have to want that, and for whatever reason, because of the weight of it, because of the way even social media is now, and all the other factors that come into the criticism of these guys on a regular basis, it's like, you know what, I'm a hoop. I'll take a sneaker deal. I'll take a Skims deal, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But I'm good. I'm good on all the other stuff right there. But when you talk about wanting it, you're somebody who wants it. Like, you're driven. So let's manifest a couple things here for Dan Rohme. Who are some of your dream clients, whether they're NBA, NFL, actors? Who is somebody that you cannot wait to work? And you already have a long list of people you have worked with, but who are some folks you want to work with Rhome Sports and Entertainment?
Oh, man. To me, I love guys that actually kind of want to do stuff, and whether it be, I don't know if you know this, but like I started a bar mitzvah business for Kylo Quinn. He was in
Oh,
New
wow.
York. I was getting a ton of, kind of inbound traffic for Kristaps. We had done one, Kristaps got invited to a bar mitzvah. It was kind of an appearance. We did it. It went great. And then all of a sudden everyone kind of knew about it. So we're getting a ton of traffic in. And I was like, listen, he's not trying to do all these. He'd never been to a bar mitzvah. We thought it'd be fun. It was kind of a one-off kind of thing. But I have this guy, Kylo Quinn. He's the life of the party. He's got a great personality. The funniest person I know, not even funniest NBA player, funniest guy I know, just lights
Wow.
up every room he walks in. And I started sending him bar mitzvahs, and he was a hit. And he would show up, he'd, have a couple drinks, he'd eat, he'd dance, he's talking to everybody, and they loved him. And, we set up this, it was kind of a nice little business for him. I got Ian Bagley, was at ESPN at the
Oh,
time. Ian wrote a
sure.
great story about it. I think at the time it was the best performing story he had ever written for ESPN. So it was just it was a great thing. So I think, having guys that like to get out there and like to do
Mhm.
things and really want to be activated, at the end of the day, I mean, obviously there's just so many wonderful stories in the NBA. And that's one thing I think people are, I'm not going to name names, but, certain places are so focused on two or three guys that it's hurting the brand long term, right?
Yeah.
There's so many interesting stories. There's so many touch points that a human being can hold on to and want to root for somebody, right? Like when I was a kid, Aaron Williams was my favorite best. He was a bench guy for the
Mm.
Nets.
I
He
remember.
was a
Yeah.
guy that would come off, he'd give them 8 points, 4 rebounds.
Does
He
work.
just he worked
Yeah.
hard, he grinded. I love the Charles Opens, I love the guys that were out there, not the most athletic, but they just worked their butts off. They played hard, they played defense, they were kind of enforcers. They were tough. And it was, those were the guy I was rooting for those guys. And it's like, if 13-year-old Dan Rome can love Aaron Williams as his favorite basketball player growing up, then there's a million other stories in between the LeBrons and the Steph Currys, right? Like there's so many things out there that can resonate with people and cause them to give them that emotional ties to want to check in on these guys, to want to go to games, to want to, watch TV and do the different things
Mhm.
that come along with it. And I think we as a whole collective within basketball really need to do that, because the difference between basketball and football is people root for football teams, whereas a lot of times in basketball people are focused on players, right? Outside of like the Knicks and Boston and kind of marquee franchises, a lot of fandom kind of comes and goes with the players, right? And at the end of the day, we need to do a better job of telling all these amazing stories, because there's so many wonderful individuals. And that leads me to a guy like Myles Turner. Miles is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. He's brilliant. I tell him all the time, you could be
Yeah.
the president of the United States. Like you can be anything you want when basketball's over, And to me, I'm more excited for Miles. He's a phenomenal player. He's a borderline all-star. He should have been an all-star last year. probably should have been All-Star this year, but he's a guy that really, like, his second act is going to be amazing because he can do anything. And he builds Legos, he doesn't play with them, he's interesting. And not only is he interesting, but he's genuine and he's willing to do things. He's willing to put himself out there and really kind of be a genuine person. And like, that's the type of person, and those are the stories that we should be telling. Those are things like people like see that and they're into it. And it's like when we told the Kylo Bar mitzvah story, like everybody in New York was like, bar mitzvah Kyle, I'm Jewish, and it was like, it was a touch point. Kyle was a
Yeah.
bench guy, was an energy guy, was definitely a fan favorite in the Garden, but it was a touch point. It was a way for people to kind of look at him like, oh, he's one of us. He's part of the tribe. We get that all the time. People were excited by it. And there's so many genuine, wonderful human beings in the NBA. And it's funny. I joke with KP all the time. Derek White's my favorite basketball player. And it's just the way he carries himself, the way he plays basketball. Like, I obviously don't have a favorite basketball player, but but Derek
I
White, I
understand.
admire. He's just the way he plays, right? He's so fundamentally sound. He passes the ball. He's always in the right spot. He's so smart, and he's a great guy. I would love, and I've met him in passing, and said hello to him and things like that. But like, why don't we know more about Derek
Derek
White?
White.
Like, right? Like, how many people in the country know that Derek White was, like I think he was a D2 guy, right? Like, didn't he like grow a few, like, but like the story's not told the way that it should be, right? Like, guys are just, they need to be in scenarios where their stories are told. And there's so many, 1 through 15, there's stories there.
Yeah.
And I think we as collectively as a business need to lean into that in order to make sure that we maintain, where we're at as, in my opinion, the pinnacle of sports.
Dan, with you, at least behind the scenes, some of these great stories are going to get told. Even as you're talking, I'm pretty sure it was you who got me linked up with Myles Turner when he was coming out of college. So I got to do his interview in that draft as well too. I forgot about that one. So shout out to
Yeah.
you again too. You've been working with some of the league's best, but even that, like I remember interviewing Grievous Vasquez one time and Brandon Knight, and giving out backpacks at a park. And while those things seem sometimes meaningless, like those are really the stories. So I'm 1000% with you. Yes, our stars, our luminaries are exactly that, and they should be celebrated. But everybody does have a story, as you alluded to, 1 through 15. And again, with you at the helm with Rhome Sports and Entertainment, I know some of these stories, some of these guys, their personalities are going to get shown, and I give you all the props and kudos in the world, for the work that you're doing.
I appreciate that. And you touched on the community aspect. I mean, Myles Turner's out there, that's one of my favorite things. I've probably served, 5,000 Thanksgiving dinners, and I've probably given out a couple thousand backpacks, and I've taken a probably 1,000 kids shopping for Christmas. Not me, obviously, but I'm coordinating these things
Right.
for my clients. And like a guy like Myles Turner's out his rookie season, handing out food and packages to homeless people just on his own, no cameras, just, hey, I got some time. I'm going to go out and just do this wonderful, great thing. They had this program called Warm. I think it's We All Really Matter. And now it's kind of turned to we work as role models, I believe. And his thing was to keep these kind of little packs in his car where he could give them out to different people as he kind of came across them. And a guy like Kyle Lowry, Kyle
Mm.
is in North Philly all the time giving out backpacks, Thanksgiving dinners. I mean, we're feeding hundreds of people. He's setting them up with turkeys and cranberries and stuffing and everything they need, pies. His wife Ayana ran it. We'd be out giving backpacks out, and these are people. It's just super special. I bring my daughters every year, and these are people that people forget about. They're beyond underserved, and to be out in the community in the gyms that he played in, and doing these great things. And he obviously runs his AU teams and things like that, but at the end of the day, those things are so impactful. And just to show people that, yes, you have gone on to these great things. Yes, you may not reside in the same neighborhood anymore, but you haven't forgotten them. And to me, that's the message that is truly special.
Truly, truly, indeed special, Dan. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and the work that you have done in the NBA, the grace and help you've provided me, in my younger career. And congratulations on the success that you have and will continue to have with Rhome Sports and Entertainment. I think this is a perfect place to wrap and gives us some opportunity for a conversation again down the line. He is Dan Rohme, again, founder of Rhome Sports and Entertainment. I am Warren Shaw. You can follow me at Shaw Sports NBA or dope_interview. You can follow Dan at DRome on Instagram. You know what it is, family. It's been another dope interviews with my guy, Dan Rohme. Yo, and we're out.
Together we stand, divided we never. The vision is one, striving for the better. Working as a team, working toward a dream. It's not even work when the team is the dream. On a united front, we got our own back. A band of brothers to counteract any attack. One heart in fact, forget what the blood say. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA. So let's do it for the love, give to the max. Listen to opinion, but react to facts. And remember that together with a shh, but separate, just pieces of it. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA.
Family represent like a tree with names on it. We're free, no chains on it. Relieved, the pain's gone, I can see. We come together like questions on the quiz. Mojo Flow and Viz, man, you know what it is. And if ignorance is bliss, you're gonna hate this lesson. Organized intellect like a tropical depression. My symbol is the cross, a mic and ghost peppers. Cause I'm just a black sheep growing up to be a shepherd. Moonlighting as a weapon to protect the children. Every brother is a father, dynasties we're building. Max, J and K, Bay, and Isaiah, next level of the family foundation. Understand me?